on what we did yesterday is just sort of talk about where we're at in terms of various facets of the music business, the music industry, and perhaps more importantly, the music itself. Because we have Maggie Rose, who some of you may have seen last night here, doing some spelling, crushing it on the side, and obviously is a very compelling artist in her own right. Having said that, I will let these four fine folks introduce themselves. But what I asked, for those of you who were here yesterday, if you remember at the outset, I asked everyone to say who they were, and then talk about some musical moment that sort of inspired them or set them on their path. Well, today, since we have Ben from Third Man, I'm tweaking that slightly to ask everybody about a piece of vinyl, recorded music, whatever it might be. And then we'll just pick up the conversation from there. So, Ben, what would you like to say?
Hi, I'm Ben Blackwell from Third Man Records, co-founder, co-owner. I don't have official job title. My business card says Psychedelic Stooge on it.
Nice.
So I get to pick a lot of things that I want to do or don't want to do. I oversee vinyl production. We have a pressing plant up in Detroit. Do little bits of A&R, oversee staff here in Nashville. Kind of a conglomeration of a lot of tasks that don't really make sense packaged all together. To answer your question about a piece of recorded music, since we're talking about the live sphere, I had a moment when I was 13 years old, playing video games in the basement of the house, listening to Nirvana, and thinking, I'm a really big Nirvana fan. I need to further expand on how much of a fan I am of Nirvana. And so the neighborhood I lived in the east side of Detroit, there was a head shop walking distance from my house that sold bootlegs. And so I walked down to the head shop and bought a bootleg CD of Nirvana Roma, which is one of the last shows they played on their In Utero tour. It's like February '94. And was completely transfixed with bootleg live recordings, still to this day. But I just keep on going back to the fact of I walked to the head shop. I didn't care about the water pipes and the stash boxes and the triple beam scales and all that. I was drawn to it's a remnant of the 60s at that point. This is the mid-90s. They were still selling bootlegs. That's my record story.
That's fair. By the way, I just want to point out, hopefully some of you are like me, similar story, except I walked over and picked up the Relix magazine. That was on the, it's true, at Henry's Hideaway in Providence, Rhode Island.
The Groove Shop, Detroit, Michigan, since 1969.
Lovely. Henry, alas, has moved on to other things. Maggie Rose, can you talk about...
Yes, I'm Maggie Rose. I like the psychedelic, what's it called? Psychedelic Stooge. I'm an American rock and soul singer, since there's not a clearly defined genre to check for me, but I grew up in the era of the diva. To me, I've always been a singer, and women were really ruling the world. It was Whitney and Mariah and the Chicks and Destiny's Child and Sheryl Crow, and even Leanne Rimes. My first concert was Shania Twain when I was 6 years old, and she was larger than life. And I bought the single cassette for All I Want to Do by Sheryl Crow at Sam Goody with my own money when I was about 5 years old. That felt like a big accomplishment, and like I really owned that piece of music. But everywhere I looked, there were women doing it, so it felt very accessible to me, and it encouraged me to sing a lot growing up.
Sure. Before we move on to JC, can we talk a little bit, while I have you right here, not that I want to have you for 49 more minutes, your podcast, which is delightful. Can you just talk a little bit about sort of what set that in motion and what sort of you bring to bear as you are speaking with these pretty incredible artists that, make some time to rap with you?
They are incredible artists, and I think it was born from the pandemic. I wanted to stay connected with my fellow musician. One of my favorite things about living in Nashville is that community and just being, music adjacent. So that was a way for me to reach out to a lot of people that I admired, and particularly women in the industry or people who identify as a woman in the industry. Most of them are artists, some of them are executives or producers. And I think you also just get sick of yourself after a while. I can only focus on what I'm doing, and it's nice to talk to Mary Chapin Carpenter, or I'm sorry, Melissa Etheridge. She's on my list, though. Mary Chapin's on my list. And feel like she's got it all figured out, and listen to her talk about struggles that are very real and very challenging, and you just feel that camaraderie and connection to your fellow artists. And we're about to continue the 4th season. So it's something that I thought would just only last during the lockdown, and it's work that I really love and want to continue.
That's fair. Maybe we'll come back to sort of the COVID side and the impact and all that, which, again, we talked about a bit yesterday. JC.
Hey, I'm JC, and I'm the chief guitar tuner at Gibson. So if your guitar's not in tune, it's me. If it is in tune, you can tell me too. But I'm the CEO of Gibson Guitars right here in Nashville. Yeah, right here. Every single Gibson electric guitar is made right here in Nashville, for real. And our acoustics are made in Bozeman, so it's pretty cool. We are the #1. I say this with feet on the ground. But it's an interesting stat for Nashville that we're the #1 employer of music in Music City. And we have over 1,000 craftsmen and craftswomen making these amazing guitars. And then we've got the whole team here that, our headquarters and all that. We have repair and restoration, all sorts of cool stuff. So it's an amazing opportunity and obligation to fuel Music City through what we do. Prior to that, I was the president of Levi's brand and did that. So a little bit of understanding of how to take an iconic brand that maybe took its leadership for granted and then pivoted into an opportunity. And it's a very, very similar playbook here for Gibson. And if the last few years is an indicator, we're off to a pretty good start. And so are we talking about albums, right? Let's go back, because you assumed it was vinyl. I'm looking at Maggie on, was she in the vinyl? And by the way, if you haven't heard Maggie, awesome artist and awesome human.
I did invoke vinyl, but it's,
So my story was one of, as a kid, we lived all over the world. My dad was military, and we were always like scrounging. We didn't grow up with a ton of money, but we always had fun, and we were adventurous. And so we couldn't afford albums, so we bought 45s, right? And I had a twin brother, and we always had to pick which song had the most value. Like, could you get an A side and a B side? Then one year, my grandmother said, I want both of you two to go pick out an album of your choice, a record. Go get a record. We're like, oh my God. She goes, you tell me how much. And so as kids, you gravitate, your passion is one thing, but you start to learn utility value very early on. So where did we go? We said, did she say album or albums? So we both went to the record store in Toronto, Canada, and said, what if we each pick a double live album? Like, that counts, right? And they were twice as much. We went from 45s and got promoted to double albums. So what were the two albums? If you were back in that era, there were only two in 1975, 76 that kind of mattered live. One was Kiss Alive, right? And the other, Frampton Comes Alive, right? So that was my intro, and it's amazing. If you open up the sleeve to Kiss Alive, and you read, as a kid, we read everything, and right in the middle of that whole thing, it said, Kiss is the greatest rock and roll. This is Gene's voice. Kiss is the greatest rock and roll band, and they only use Gibson guitars and Pearl drums because they demand the best. I said, fuck it, one day I'm going to own a Gibson guitar and a Pearl drum set, and I now own both because of Kiss Alive. And then I had a confession to Peter Frampton, who's an amazing guy, lives here. I was with him in this venue a couple weeks ago. And I said, Peter, I got a confession. He says, what? I said, I thought your name was Frampton Combs. Because it's Frampton Comes Alive. I was like, Frampton Combs Alive. And he's like, that's pretty interesting. I never thought of it that way. And who shows up with a double live album but Peter Frampton? So that was my intro to Double Live.
How rare it must be for him to hear something new, by the way, after all this time.
Yeah, true.
So you get to share that with him. Vinyl, The thing I grew up on vinyl. The beauty of vinyl was just the legibility of just sticking with this for a minute, and then we're coming to Braden. The legibility of the text. You could sit back on your bed or wherever you were listening and just open it up, or just look at the back and read. So I'm curious, Ben, to you, sir.
I just have to say, for someone to talk about legibility, his notes are the most. I can't even make out 3 letters. So legibility is important. I hear you 100%.
Fair. Thank you, sir.
I didn't think you were going to give me a way to actually talk about that.
That's delightful, and I respect you for that, sir. I'm curious, like, just in terms of that aspect of it, being able to, there are a lot of things that come with vinyl. One of them, to my mind at least, is that, and that's part of the experience, right? Back in the day, Marshall McLuhan, a good Canadian fellow, by the way, he would talk about, cool experience, warm experience, and a warm experience was something that would totally envelop you and engage you. And vinyl was a warm experience because, number one, you'd have to turn and flip it over. So you're constantly involved in the musical, how it flowed over you.
Physically engaged with it.
Correct. And above and beyond that, you could read the darn thing, as opposed to like a CD booklet, which is, that can be rough going. So I'm curious to what extent, you've been conscious of that aspect of things at Third Man.
Well, the simple way is vinyl records, simply, without putting any additional effort or thought into it, are still really, really compelling. You just put out a black vinyl piece of record, and folks want to buy it, folks love it, it's engaging. We've put a lot of our effort in the past of trying to expand upon that. So we've done liquid-filled records. We've done records that had other records sealed within them. Colored vinyl, everyone does colored vinyl. Last year, we did a reissue with this band, Sleep. They have an album called Dope Smoker, which is a 60-minute long song about smoking weed. Really, really a very, very lauded cult record. And I feel like people had talked about and tried to do this for a long time. We pressed a version of the record, about 300 copies, with actual marijuana leaves embedded into the disc. So when I say, at Third Man, I kind of do whatever needs to be done, I think it was 6 or 7 phone calls, meetings, Zooms, whatever, about the actual legality of doing this. Like what hoops we had to jump through. Our manufacturing plant is in Detroit, where recreational marijuana is legal. But we didn't know if we needed licenses to sell this. Well, we had all these questions because we've never done anything like this. No one else had done it. And after going through it all, I'm such a not pot smoker. I didn't know. I went and visited the dispensary, and I'm like, guys, there's this dumpster outside with all this pot. They just we're in the middle of a neighborhood. Look at all this pot. And the guys are like, those are the leaves. You can't smoke the leaves. You smoke the flower. I'm like, embarrassed. But so we took the leaves, we embedded them in the records. And the state marijuana board was only concerned, their biggest concern was not that what we were doing or anyone trying to smoke it, was they wanted to make sure we weren't advertising to kids. That was the main thing, as long as you don't pitch this to kids. But that's just one example of things that we try to do to just, people are already engaged with vinyl records, like the idea of vinyl records coming back. I do air quotes, like the perennial news story. Like that's not the story anymore. Like vinyl records are back. It's what's the next step. And so we're always trying to push it just a little bit further to keep people engaged and excited and basically trick them into listening to the music.
What about the legibility, though? You brought it up. You're going to call me out of my
it's
crappy handwriting.
It's legible, I promise.
Okay. No, but so my question is, in terms of telling us like, the narrative that accompanies it, that you can get with it. To me, that was always part of the majesty of it. Get some beautiful liners written by someone, or whatever the perspective might be. Just sometimes. Back in the day, even just a picture of the artist who you otherwise wouldn't get to see. That part of the packaging side of it. I'm just how cognizant,
Well, it's almost the opposite now. You're over inundated with all kinds of information, with just about every artist, and so it needs to. You have to strike a balance of an iconic image or something that connects with listeners, folks that you want to buy the record, but also something that you're not going to be. That's going to be one of 1,000 different images that they're going to see. It's not. You think of artists, you think in Kiss era, like they'd have the album cover and they'd have 2 press shots, and that would last them for about 4 years in terms of what they're getting out there on an album cycle.
Yeah, and by the way, that's what made you want to go see that artist. When that artist came to your town, it's like, oh gosh, Todd Rundgren. I've never had an opportunity. So I think that was sort of a fascinating narrative that would sort of undergird all of that. Also, since you mentioned colored vinyl, I should point out, and I think it's still available, that Maggie Rose has a Relix red vinyl that I think you could still buy on the Relix marketplace on your phone if you're so moved. It came out a little while ago, but
There's only 300 copies too, I think so. These are,
Printed at Third Man. See,
yes.
it's all coming together.
But I would also, just to add to that, to John, so when has it worked where your parents or your grandparents give you in my day it was way different and you got to come back in time? When did that ever work for you? It's worked a little bit in nostalgic, but I think one of the things that I've noticed, and you're right, vinyl's back, it's back. So every year I choose one gift for my family. This year, what came out was, and this is not a shameless plug, but they finally found record players that could connect seamlessly with Sonos. So I've invested in Sonos in my whole house, and I'm like, I need Pandora, Spotify, Apple Music. All of a sudden, it's like this one little breakthrough innovation meant I could plug a record player in. So I bought all albums for my kids, my wife, and everyone, their top 10 albums. And now it wasn't like, you should go back to vinyl. I'm like, check this out. And we have that in our house now. But it's a convenient mechanism to deliver vinyl through an existing great sound system. And then you get to explore what an album is. So if you haven't done that, there's a solution out there that doesn't involve you having to invest thousands and thousands for the vinyl movement. I don't know if you've seen that, but it's pretty cool.
fair enough. Braden, hi, how are you, sir?
Good. Thank you guys for having me.
Why?
It's a little intimidating being on this part of the venue. If we were hosting the panel back there, I'd be a little more comfortable. And I can see myself on the TV screens over there, which is super uncomfortable. Anyways, I'm Braden Roundtree. I'm a partner and agent at WME in our Nashville office. And I'm responsible for signing and shepherding the careers of all sorts of kinds of artists. And my earliest musical influence, I suppose, is Teddy Ruxpin.
Nice.
Yeah. That's the first thing I remember as a kid of music, was putting the tape in and Teddy Ruxpin would sing what I wanted him to sing. So,
What would come out of Teddy Ruxpin?
you know, it was so inspirational. I can't remember the songs, but it's something like, "Oh, the I love you, you love me." Yeah, we were a family.
As you moved forward in your life, what engaged you? What set you on your path to wanting to become an agent?
Well, I started playing music as a young kid, or really young. I was infatuated with anything I could hit, really. So all my grandparents' pots and pans had tons of dents in them, from where I was just banging on them. And so my parents thought it might be a productive outlet to enroll me in music lessons, which they started with piano, and I hated it. And then we moved to guitar, hated it, and finally landed on drums, which is the easiest instrument to play. And so anyways, I grew up playing drums. And once I was in college, realized that there was a plethora of better drummers than me. So I graduated from college and just figured I would get a banking job and play drums on the weekends. And somebody just kind of put a little nugget in my head that maybe I should look at music business. So I just started researching it and came upon Belmont University. I'd already had a music degree, but moved here. I'd never even been to Nashville. So enrolled in Belmont to do their master's program. It was an MBA with the emphasis in music business, which I actually dropped the music business emphasis and did a negotiations emphasis. So I don't know, all things being equal, I figured agenting was probably the right course for me. And I didn't listen to albums growing up. We lived in very rural East Texas, and all I heard was kind of what was coming through my parents' car radio. And we didn't have any money to disposable any money for that. But I think the first album I bought was Aerosmith's "Get a Grip" album. You know, so I know not like super mind-bending musical influences here, Teddy Ruxpin to Aerosmith, but
You win, sir, to my mind.
but I've always been infatuated with live performance. Again, we were from a very rural part of East Texas, and probably our church choir was the only thing I really saw a live performance of on a regular basis. So when I would get out, into the world a little bit and see people playing, it was really intriguing.
One thing that's different from yesterday's panel at the same time is that all four of you actually are based in Nashville, and which is where we sit. How many people here I'm just curious, are based in Nashville? Oh, so it's plenty, right? So I'm not. I'm curious, and I'd like to hear from all four of you really about this. I mean, what do you think? What's the Nashville part of the equation? What do you think that brings to bear in terms of what you do, how you engage the community, however you want to take that?
Well, obviously I moved here in 2002 because I wanted to work in the country music industry. I've been a fan of it my entire life, but have also been a fan of all other genres of music. And I think when I moved here, I very much was like, oh, Nashville, it's a place for country music. And it is, obviously, but once I got here, realized that, faith-based music is huge here, and music publishing, and there's all sorts of content creators that are based in Nashville that, I think Nashville is sort of like the New York City of the South. Nobody's from here. If you are, you're a unicorn. And so I think it's very much a melting pot like a New York or Chicago or a Los Angeles, and as more metropolitan as the city has gotten over the last decade or so, I think the more that the cultures have been blending and able to take those outside, because I think we have some of the best content creators here based in Nashville. And now you have people in other areas of the country and the world that want to collaborate with our content creators, which has really helped spread sort of what I think our culture is here, which is very friendly and very family environment.
JC?
Yeah, when I was a kid, Nashville was a mythical place. I lived in a military family. We lived all over the world, and my parents would do this like pilgrimage to Nashville. My dad played banjo, even though he's a naval aviator. My mom's a really cool, sort of free spirit from Nova Scotia, Canada, and she played guitar. And their common bond was music. And so they would do this pilgrimage and drive to Nashville, and they'd come home with like Grand Ole Opry stickers and stories of who they saw, and we were just like, whoa, like that's like crazy. And then fast forward, when I had the opportunity to contemplate, taking on the Gibson role in Nashville, and they're like, well, and someone says, well, do you want to go to Nashville and do a trip before you move there? I'm like, what? Like, I'm going to go there and it's not good enough for me? Are you kidding? Like, give me a one-way ticket. I'm going to Nashville. And what I would say, though, what I've learned is that, and this is, I think, really relevant to us here who are connected to music, 99% of people come to Nashville to fuel their soul in music. Tourists, Broadway, concerts, Ryman, Luke Combs playing at Nissan. They're coming from different places to feed their soul in music from Music City. And it really struck me that us connected directly or indirectly in music, we not only have an opportunity to engage in music, we have an obligation to continue to fuel Music City by leveraging and honoring our legacy past of all the genres, being present in the moment and solving some really interesting experiential dynamics. If you haven't been to the Gibson Garage, we're trying that there. This is a place that is trying to solve a dynamic of experience meets entertainment, meets all sorts of things. If you haven't been here for an event, evening, music, it's awesome. But at the same time, we have to have a vision for the future to say, and this is a profound maybe statement, but as leaders, we all have an opportunity in 20, 30 years to look back and say, we had a chance to contribute to Music City. What did we do? What did we do? And let's make sure we can answer that. And I find the kinds of people that come here are like-minded. It's not they're leaving somewhere just because it sucked. They're being drawn to Music City because there's something happening here. What it is ain't exactly clear.
Oh, I thought you were going there.
You know I was going there. So I would just say it's been amazing. Every person I've engaged with is welcoming, and the Gibson story wasn't an easy one. By the way, 5 years ago, almost to the day, Gibson was technically bankrupt. The ship had sunk. And so coming in here and having a vision of how do you reimagine something that's been around for 130 years? And we had this little sort of Canadian PowerPoint piece of cardboard I held up and said, SOS, let's save our sound. Let's save the sound of Gibson. It's worth saving. And that immediately pivoted to this notion of share of sound. And conceptually, like, we all are in sound somehow or another to create music. But have you ever, we talk about market share. Have you ever thought about who owns the share of sound? And so our SOS sign went from like save our sound to share of sound, and more music has been written and recorded and played live on Gibson instruments than all other instruments combined, just because we've been around for so long. Acoustic, electric, amazing genres. So how do you take that SOS from a distress signal to an absolute vision of share of success and share of sound going forward? That's the challenge for us.
Maggie Rose, what led you here to share your sound based in lovely Nashville?
Nashville's presented itself in so many different ways to me over the 15 years that I've lived here. And, I've been deeply entrenched in the Music Row way of things. I was, signed at 19 years old to a major label and releasing songs to terrestrial country radio, which was God, and that was everything that your success was dependent upon. And then I kind of untangled myself from that a couple years later, and this was a great incubation place for me to find my sound and be humbled tremendously, and also write in rooms with people who were so accomplished at what they did that it was kind of this baptism by fire thing where I just had to rise to their level. It's a place where I play the Grand Ole Opry regularly, but then I also sing Alanis Morissette with Andy Frasco and the UN on this stage here. And it's a very versatile place to me, and I think that's why I've stayed here, because like what you're saying, we're trying to mine all we can out of a really rich community that I think conveniently for me has evolved with me as I've lived here. It's a very different town than the one I moved to, and it's not just because of what I was or had not yet been exposed to. It's doing the work to grow, and I want to honor it by staying here and growing with it.
Ben?
It's interesting. I hadn't considered before moving here. I played drums in a band, and we'd come through and we'd play Nashville, and always had really, really amazing shows. But I never really connected the dots. I was like, oh yeah, we had a great show in Nashville, whatever, no big deal. We play The End, we play Exit In, we play Mercy Lounge, whatever. It was always a good show. And it wasn't until I moved here, and got invited to a Kentucky Derby party in next door neighbor's house. I was like, come on over. Hadn't met before, and so it was a kind of olive branch. Let's meet up and introduce ourselves. So we went over, and I'm not usually a drinker, but they were making Pimm's cups, and they were really, really good. And I started noticing everyone at this little party. It was like maybe 10, 15 people. Everyone was in the music industry. And I thought, wow, man, I was, in a band doing record label stuff in Detroit. And even within my own social circle, if there was a party, there would be like, oh yeah, there's like one guy who works in the music industry, and everyone else is waiters or bartenders or whatever. And I thought that was so, it was such a sense of relief of, you have those moments where you interact with people that are just out of your world, that don't really understand what you do. Like you go to the dentist, and say, I work at a record label. In Detroit, they would say, what's a record label? Like, what does that mean? Like, what do you do? And so I have to explain to them how a record is made, all this, this very, very basic things that you would explain to a child. But in Nashville, I'm always, it's beautiful because I'll go to the dentist and I'll say, oh yeah, I run a record label. I'm like, yeah, what do you think, what vinyl pressing plant are you using lately? Because we've had troubles with this one, and everyone is so conversant. I think that's really, really a testament. You talked about how many folks you employ. I think of that in regards to, I'd heard a statistic about Nashville that the number of people overall citywide who are involved in music is per capita larger than anywhere else, if not in the United States, in the world. So yes, the idea that so many of us are working towards this same goal of sharing sound, of telling stories through it. You can feel that. It feels different than in other places. Even other great musical cities, it doesn't have that much connectivity.
So I remember a couple years ago, Relix Music Conference, Mr. Don Was was here. And yes. And aside from an extraordinary artist, head of Blue Note. And at the time, he was talking about some of the issues they were having sourcing vinyl for their records. And where I'm getting at this is a cheery topic we'll call the pandemic, which is something we took on yesterday in thinking about where we are now and where everything sits. But I'm curious, Ben, for you, and then JC, for you as well, just in terms of raw materials and keeping everything going, but specifically for vinyl and obviously other materials for you and everything that came with it. I mean, to what extent were you sidelined, and where are we now in April of 2023?
So in Michigan, I think we were unable to manufacture for about 6 weeks, April, May of 2020. But we were able to get back manufacturing. I don't know if it was sooner or later than other folks. We were basically lumped in with auto manufacturing. Manufacturing is, obviously a big driver in the state of Michigan. So we weren't sidelined very long, but we had already experienced pretty long lead times before the pandemic exacerbated it all. As of right now, a year ago, we would probably, in terms of booked jobs, capacity, filled, we'd probably know what we were filled for the next 10 months. We had all those jobs lined up in the pressing plant. And now it's maybe we're getting to a point where it's more like 3, 4-ish. So on one hand, that's really, really great for the guy that oversees the record label. And I don't have to plan out 10 months in advance what record I need to be ready. And when you have an artist, they're really excited, they've got new music, and you're okay, wait 10 months. It's maddening, So on that regard, in terms of the artistic realm, I'm very, very excited, and it makes things a little more motivating and exciting. On the running a business that depends on filling the capacity, I definitely have people in the organization who are, well, when are the more orders going to come? I'm like, well, they'll come in. The idea of you've had this period for 2, almost 3 years where you've known so far in advance you've had all of your capacity filled. That gives some people concern. So, it gets better. It gets better. It never necessarily gets easier. It's just your worry shifts from one end to the other, at least in my experience.
Jason?
Yeah, I remember, I was actually here, the day that things shut down. This venue. It was supposed to open in the end of March of 2020. Jason Isbell was going to launch his album here, and it was the big opener. And there were 7 people in this room by design, because no one knew what to do. Jason, I'm going to go on there and live streamed it. It was innovative at the time. I would argue it was the first live streamed COVID related launch and concert in the world probably happened right here. And I was here. I felt like the VI, I had my own high top, and Pete Shapiro said, "What do you need?" I said, 3 Red Bulls and a bottle of Casamigos and ice. And I was right there, and I watched it. It was haunting, and we weren't allowed to clap because 7 people clapping is just bad on a live stream, right? So it was very haunting. But so fast forward, I mean, we convinced ourselves in Nashville that, ready for this, if alcohol was an essential business and groceries, and if you're in Music City, then guitar should be an essential business. And we had to keep our crafteries going to condition the wood and everything. And there was way more questions than answers. And I remember that Sunday night, and remember we have 1,000 folks here making guitars. And I called the team and HR, I said, guys, like the city is shutting down. We're not opening tomorrow. There's gonna be way more questions than answers. And you're talking about 20 and 30 and 40 year craftsmen and craftswomen what do they do? How long is it gonna last? Did anyone know? No? I said, we're putting $1,000 in everyone's bank account just to say, get through this. And we did. We figured out a way to do it. And that Monday morning, we had to say, everyone shut down. But meanwhile, in the other side of my mind, I was like, hold on. If this plays out, the #1 issue we have in the guitar industry at large is 8 out of 10 people actually quit within 6 months of learning guitar. That's a real stat. And the string broke, my fingers hurt, my friends made fun of me, so I gave it up. What if this was the moment where 8 out of 10 people who started had the time, the patience, the perseverance, a little bit of latent talent, a tribal community that was supportive, because we all had to be, and all of a sudden, that number flipped. And it wasn't all of a sudden, it was over the course of a year and a half, someone who'd never played a guitar learned 5 chords, 10 songs with their friends in that little tribal bubble, and they now consider themselves a guitarist. So COVID was able to flip. The #1 single biggest issue we had was 8 out of 10 people left our industry. Now 8 were staying. Just imagine that as the COVID creative positive output of what was a terrible obstacle course of our lives. We somehow, through music, turned it into an opportunity course for individuals and their communities. So, yes, there were supply chain issues, and yes, there were challenges, and with all sorts of a host of issues, but we were so focused on turning this into a positive outcome despite the very real dynamics, the team rallied behind it. And we had very specific things in place, and we made T-shirts for people like "Stay 2 flying V's apart." We're not 6 feet apart. We're like, yeah, we got flying V's. And then the artists started coming back. We were able. The other thing, we launched Gibson TV, Gibson Media, as a result of COVID. Artists had time and stories to tell, so we were able to capture those moments. And all of a sudden, now we have this amazing content. We have this a group of guitarists who are going to be on a 30, 40, 50-year journey because they started playing guitar during COVID. We always talk about setting, as leaders, we can't guarantee success, but we should be able to guarantee we can set better conditions for success. And through COVID, we did. We set conditions for a guitarist journey, for content creation, for influencing the future of music through guitars, through artists, through the Gibson Garage, et cetera. So the supply chain was challenging, but what I found, and I'm sure you found it too, and I don't know if some of you working around, like everyone was behind us. Everyone knew that our noble cause was to put amazing guitars into artists' hands to then show up on a stage or a recording studio to create something that we all wanted so badly. And in the words of Joni Mitchell, pivoting to the live, like, you don't know what you got till it's gone. Right? And when music sort of went away live, things started happening on the side, and now it's back, and it feels awesome. And people they just love that experience because they couldn't have it, and now when they have it, they're telling more people about it. So I think we'll look back, and there's the dark side of COVID, but there's this absolute bright side that I think music played a role and should continue to play a powerful role through that era.
Braden, from your perspective, so you had all these artists who had to sit on their hands, metaphorically, hopefully. And then they're ramped up and ready to go simultaneously once everything was in place that permitted it. Can you talk about what that challenge was like? And then from your perspective, where you think we sit now in terms of making sure you can support, all these amazing artists that are out on the road, sometimes simultaneously, in a given city and the like.
Yeah, it was definitely the floodgates opened, because it's not like the entire United States or the entire world opened up for business again. Like various areas would open up, and a lot of my job during COVID was just like talking to venues and talking to promoters and talking to city council people, just being like, what are the protocols, right? And even before venues or cities were open, like, what are you thinking the protocols will be, right? And just trying to prepare everybody for what is it going to be like. And once venues started opening, even the reduced capacity stuff, everybody wanted to try to figure out a way to go do it, just to get out there and do it again. I mean, obviously there was a financial aspect, but mostly just artists wanted to go play and be out there. That was, from what I hear from a lot of artists, a pretty dark time for them when they're not, out there putting their craft out to the world. And so, yeah, it was definitely, the floodgates were a little bit open, and you'd try to prepare your managers and your artists for like, hey, it's not going to be the same right now. People may be wearing masks in the crowd, and you may not be able to have meet and greets, and there may be all these other protocols about backstage, and most everybody was understanding, but still, some acts didn't particularly like it, but at the end of the day, they're still out there, bringing their art to the people. So it was a lot of communication. I've talked to way more agents at other agencies during that time than I do now, but because we were all in it together. We're trying to figure out how can we get this back, and how do we not step on each other's toes, and try to do as many shows as we can, right? Most artists wanted to get out there immediately. Some artists didn't, because they just wanted to wait until there wasn't reduced capacities, and the fans weren't wearing masks, and there weren't any protocols backstage, and that was fine. That's the prerogative. I think heading into 22, from 21, was crazy. Last year was so crazy with market traffic, which is like just number of artists that are playing in a market, and trying to facilitate announces and on sales that don't get swallowed up by bigger artists that are announcing and going on sale. So, even moving into this year, we were still kind of dealing with it. I think we're still probably a year out from really getting everybody back on a regular cycle, right? Until where you don't feel like there's 25 stadium shows in a city every year. But as he was saying, we're in a fantastic place, from a touring standpoint. I think, another great thing about COVID, if there was like one, silver lining, was that people were at home and they were playing music, but they were listening to music, right? And so coming out of COVID, there was a lot of newer acts that everybody was excited to see, because they were discovering them, via the DSPs and TV or radio or whatever means they were finding, which there was a ton. TikTok, right, became a thing during COVID. All these acts coming out of TikTok now. So while it was a dark time, it was also a good time for people to re-engage with music.
Well, Maggie Rose, so you created your podcast during COVID, as you described. Talk about like the challenges. And one thing we heard yesterday through an artist manager is he felt there was a little bit of pressure on his artists to sort of present themselves to the public in a way to stay engaged during that time that maybe, I don't want to say unrealistic, that then once artists wanted to go back and get on the road and create music again, to maintain that level, it was challenging to keep at that. I'm curious, with all that entwined.
Yeah. When I found out that 60 scheduled shows that I had were going to be canceled overnight, and the band that I love that depends on me was going to not have those gigs anymore, and I just finished this record. I got to do my record release here finally in late August. But I'd been sitting on this project for 6 months, and then I knew that there was probably not going to be an optimal date to release it. So there's like a whole identity crisis that came with that too, because if I wasn't performing, then who was I? And I was getting reacquainted with myself and letting my followers come into the kitchen with me. And I was doing live streams in my backyard, and Gibson Garage helped me facilitate some live streams. I did some stuff in New York City at the Jazz Standard with Relix, and people were trying so hard to help artists continue connecting with people, but there was ways that I had never attempted to connect with people that went beyond my music, and it was actually a really enlightening time because I felt like that connection was a little more profound, and I was connecting with my artists and being catalyzed by what was going on to start this pandemic and do things that sort of scared the shit out of me, which made me a better artist in the long run. But also putting on my rose-colored glasses when I look at it, and I think this also ties in with the vinyl movement. Music had become not scarce to people. You could just, put on Spotify and hear your favorite record anytime. And when I scratched my CDs as a kid, I would cry because I'd have to go buy a new one. And when I play that one song on my vinyl too much and it erodes the quality, I know that I have to go buy a new one. And live music, the urgency of that moment, being there and gone, like you had to be there, was something that we didn't have. So I think it's really impressed upon people that music isn't infinite and that these opportunities are not abundant, and you have to kind of work for it as the listener too. And it put a little bit more sanctity back in the art form as a whole. And I think that is a good thing to come out of it. And I think artists are more intentional because of it too.
Yeah, that's fair. Looking at my countdown clock, and I want to let people have an opportunity to ask questions. Does anyone have one? Yes.
I wrote it out, so give me 1 second. Hi, I'm Colin Curtin. I'm in an emerging jam band from California. I just wanted to see what you all thought, and specifically you, Maggie. During COVID, artists were faced with a double-edged sword of wondering how long until they could play on a stage again, while also having an endless amount of time to create content at their own pace. Now that we're back to being able to navigate the business in person, what do you all think the balancing act in this new world with the need for constant content to push the emergence of newer artists, while they're also working all day, every day on honing craft, booking, creating albums, merchandise, so on? Like, where do you see this going?
I think that talent is necessary, of course, but so is tenacity and perseverance. I think having a healthy idea of boundaries as an individual is great no matter what your profession is, but you need to be game for it. I think that you have to be accessible in ways that artists in the past didn't have to be. A lot of my favorite artists are able to kind of be anonymous and then reemerge, and everything that they do I love. I don't think that that's an option anymore. I don't think I'm sad about it, but I also think that overexposure is something to be wary of. But you have to, that's why so many artists that I think were profoundly talented, they were kicking around before the pandemic and didn't last. It's because they didn't want to play that game, and respect to them for it. But I do think it's a necessity now. I think you have to be willing to do the work and show up. I've been an independent artist for a long time, and there are things I don't want to do, but I do because I want to come out and play.
Maybe if I can add to that, one of the things I've learned with a lot of artists, but also for us, I mean, and this might be, counter-cyclical to your marketing definition of, understand the wants and needs of your consumer. I hate that word, consumer. Consumers consume shit at a buffet, right? For real. Like they're not. We have to get back to or stay in it. The notion of fans. A fan is, the word is short for a fanatic. And I would say, through the question, and I think it ties into what Maggie said, is truly understand the fan base you have, you want to have, and you envision, and know that that fan base wants more from you than you might have initially been prepared to give. But is that a bad thing? They want your journey, they want your talent, they want your live, they want your recorded, they want the moments that show your vulnerability nowadays. And I think some of the artists that have, either through strategic intent or just serendipitous human interaction, created fan bases that people become fanatic about what you do, how you do it, where you do it, when you do it. And the other thing I've noticed is this out of this COVID dynamic is the notion of collaboration. And the one thing people will say about Nashville, unlike LA or New York, is that, they'll call New York, it's a bit of a jungle, and in LA's like, you got to work your own path. Here, you got friends. And if you are, equal to the love you give and take, all of a sudden put that in context of music, find collaborators like-minded, and think about the fan base of the future that you imagine. And if you were the fan of you, what would you expect from yourself? That's how I would look at it. And we look at it that way through Gibson lens. We have Gibson fans that I love it when they come to me and say, JC, love what you're doing, but if you could only do this. And they're coming from a place of they love what you're doing and they only want it to be better. Figure out what that fan base is today and where you want it to be tomorrow, and play a central role in it. What do you say?
Yeah, and I think just one more thing is, if you are at peace with who you are presenting yourself to be, then all of that becomes a little bit easier. And it kind of forced me to, that was the uncomfortable part of the pandemic was, all right, I can't really be contrived in what I'm presenting, and I can't overthink it. And then the bond with you and your fans is that much more sincere. And music is your first bond, but then you feel like you can kind of relax into who you are. I know that sounds so Pollyanna of me, but it's like, I'm more chill with who I am now, because I'm not worried if my mom's going to be mad that I'm cussing on my podcast anymore. I'm just going to be that person, and I'm going to be that to anyone who wants to watch or listen.
We have time for one more.
Appreciate you guys all taking the time today to speak today, by the way. I'm Nathan. I'm from the Poorhouse Music Hall in Raleigh, North Carolina. We've been a sub 300 cap music venue for 25 years. Right before COVID, we opened a vinyl shop in our upstairs part of the venue. And this summer, we are adding a vinyl record pressing plant to our business. We're opening a small manufacturing facility in downtown Raleigh, mainly for Ben and Maggie, as we kind of start producing records for independent artists and being involved with all the people we have on our stage. What are some ways that you guys cultivate the creative efforts, both from the manufacturing side and the artist side, of getting to the point where it's let's put weed leaves in the vinyl, or let's do this? What are some good ideas and kind of talking points to get that conversation started with artists, kind of from both sides as well?
I find it's a difficult balance of people who love music are great to have working at your pressing plant, but you also want people that love spreadsheets and finances and all of that stuff, because music fandom isn't what keeps machines running. It's engineers, it's steam, it's pressure. So it's a constant balance for us to always have the artistic realm somewhere in the conversation. Might not be the first thing, might not be the second thing. But you need to keep that in mind, because you are dealing with people's art. You are dealing with their passion, what they've poured themselves into. I've heard stories before of years ago, pressing plants of someone ordered a record on green vinyl. Oh, we didn't have green, so we just pressed it on purple. But no, green, everything was tied together to green. Well, whatever, it's just colored vinyl. That's the super pressing plant answer. It's all colored vinyl.
I'm probably not the most pragmatic about this. I get carried away with the emotional side of it. But I think it's collaboration. It's having people who can gently massage all of the things that need to be addressed, and having all the spokes in the wheel firmly in place. But managing expectations, having an artist who's not going to abandon all reason and logic is helpful. and having a good manager who's overseeing all
Understanding
of the process.
too, a lot of times I feel like I have to educate an artist or a label or a manager on like, here's what actually is the case. Someone will ask for a specific color. Okay, we can do that, but it's not like Pantone matching. It's not like there's an ink supply going into your vinyl vat. No, they're mixing it together like an artist will mix oil paints together to get to an actual tone. So you'll have variants. Simple things like that. If people are dead set, no, I need Pantone 107, you need to say, well, it's not going to be Pantone 107. Establishing expectations and just understanding how things work is key at every process.
Okay, actually, I'm sorry.
A good team, yeah, really.
Real quick, actually, because who doesn't enjoy a little overtime? To bring things full circle, I want to end today with the same question that we ended with last time, which I think is a perfectly fair question for this panel. It was a great question yesterday. So,
Hi, I also work at the Poorhouse Record Shop and Music Hall in Raleigh. I get to preface this question because I'm not making it up on the spot like yesterday. But you guys kind of touched on this. Do you feel good about where we're at in general as a music industry? And if you do feel good, especially projecting forward, not to contradict the panelists from yesterday, but we are actually in a recession, entering a recession, most economists would agree. So projecting forward, and also if you feel good about that, right, do you feel better than you did last year? Do you feel good about where we're at? And if you feel good, do you feel better than you did last year?
let's just take this all the way around, and then we'll kick out.
Yeah, feel good, feel better than last year. We started our company 14 years ago in the middle of a recession at a point where folks were saying, you're going to start a vinyl record label right now in 2009. So we've always been largely at odds with maybe bigger picture, how smarter minds might operate. So yes, positive, 100% over here.
I definitely feel better than last year, for sure. I think generally just the temperature's hotter with the rhetoric out there, but as humans, we acclimate. I just feel more comfortable in the heat now, I guess, but definitely better than last year.
Yeah, I often talk to the team. We've been around for 130 years, and so we've seen literally pandemics in like the early part of last century. Not me, but like royally Gibson. So you've seen election cycles, you've seen multiple recessions, economic dynamics. You've seen genres of music come out of the darkest of times called the blues, and the blues set up music as we know it today called rock and roll. So you got to look to the soul of the moment, not to just the money of the moment. And I would say we as a society, and this is not to be the big dramatic close, but if we always are looking through the lens of the quantity of life and how we measure it quantitatively, I think we'll mismanage our expectations. If we look at life through the quality lens, are we providing a quality of experience? Like fewer people better engaged in a moment that matters on a live stage. I can't speak for Maggie, but I would imagine if I said, do you want the highest quality content crowd here, or would you rather play a big stadium where people are less interested? What would you take? You would take the quality of the experience, and so would a fan. And so I think if we start measuring our success through the quality of engagement, the quantity of success will follow. We cannot control many things, and I would urge everyone, put on your own version of your noise cancellation headphones, cancel out the noise, look for the signals, and go after those signals to figure out how to set conditions for success.
Yeah, I feel wonderful. It's great. I mean, listen, I feel like any artist that wants to tour is touring. Tickets are selling. I'm not saying that every show is selling out, but, as a whole, the touring landscape is very healthy. I mean, we as agents have to think about things like recessions and going back down into lockdown potentially, but just like I feel like we're so much more well prepared for how to tackle that if something happens in the medical community that causes people to need to be isolate or whatever. But it's really healthy. It's really exciting. I think there's so many avenues for music discovery now, and that presents a little bit of a challenge in accurately touring acts these days, but it's exciting that everybody, the fans are really excited about shows, and they're spending money, sometimes too much money, but that's a different panel, right?
Fair enough. Fair enough. So thank you to all these lovely folks for joining us. Thanks to all of you, too, for coming out to the conference and asking amazing questions and being part of this. So,
Are these props, or are you guys literally serving beer at like 10 o'clock in the morning? I like that. Lagunitas, I saw that. I'm from Marin County. I just know they're good. Hoppy Refresher. So this is a gratuitous plug for Hoppy Refresher. Look at that. I'm in.